Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first in our Farming and the Environment Spring webinar programme at the North Wessex Downs AUNB. You're all very welcome. Just a little bit of context before we move on. The North Wessex Downs is the third largest AUNB in the country at 668 square miles, covering parts of Hampshire, Berkshire, Oxfordshire and Wiltshire. And there's a crucial ingredient, of course, to natural beauty, which is land management, farming and forestry. And increased engagement with land managers and farmers and the farming community has been a particular focus of the AUNB over the last couple of years, particularly trying to help support the development of farmer-led groups. The AUNB management plan identifies priorities for landscape management in the area, and the Glover review, which reported a year or so ago, added momentum to that engagement by AUNBs with farmers. And a number of AUNBs, although not ours, are involved with the DEFRA tests and trials. So with environmental land management, ELM, and particularly the Farming in Protected Landscapes programme DEFRA is proposing coming onto the horizon, there is likely to be an increasing role for AUNBs in engaging with land managers. And that's the context in which we're running these seminars. A few little bits of housekeeping just to start with. We're going to hear from Nick Marriner to start with, then Ian Waller, and then we're going to bring in Richard Edwards from the Englefield estate, who's looking at beginning the process of starting a farmer-led group, and then we'll move on to the Q&A. There's a Q&A box. You can click on it at the bottom of your screen. So feel free to submit your questions at any time. And we'll do our best to work through as many as we can between Corinna Woodall, my colleague, and myself. I'm afraid it's likely that we won't be able to answer all of them, but we'll do our very best to answer as many as we can in the time available. The whole webinar is recorded, and you will be sent a link to the recording after we've finished at some point. In an email. So without delaying it any further, I'm delighted to welcome our two speakers. First, we have Nick Marriner, who is Chilterns Conservation Board's Landowner Engagement Officer, working closely with Ian Waller, our other guest, and the 18 farmers in the Central Chilterns Farmer Cluster to get the cluster off the ground and deliver its various projects. Nick is a passionate bird watcher, a long-standing bird surveyor, and sits on the board of the River Tame Conservation Trust. Ian Waller, as well as being chair of the cluster, runs a 510-hectare arable farm near Great Missenden and also has a small flock of Herdwick sheep. He's passionate about the wildlife on his farm, as well as improving his soil health and reducing his carbon footprint. He's also a leaf demonstration farmer and NFU Council delegate for Berks, Bucks and Oxen, and a board member of the Chilterns Conservation Board. And Richard Edwards, who'll be joining us in a moment, is forestry manager for the Englefield estate near Thiel at the eastern end of the North Wessex Downs. So if I can ask Nick to switch himself on, over to you.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Henry. I'll just do the obligatory screen share moment and hope that it all works. I'm assuming, can someone give us a nod? Can you see some slides?
Yeah, that's all good.
Yeah,
thanks.
okay, brilliant. Well, great. Thanks very much for the introduction, Henry, and thanks for asking, well, not me necessarily, but asking Ian. Really, you want to hear from Ian as opposed to me. We'll come on to that in a minute, but thanks for asking us to share a bit of our story, really, as a relatively new farmer cluster in the Central Chilterns. Our story of what we're doing, but probably more importantly, I guess, for the questions and later on how we've gone about it and some of the ins and outs of the story. So I've got about probably maybe 15-20 minutes just to share what we've been doing, what we've been up to the last couple of years, and then more importantly, handing open to questions so you can find out a bit more about the how and some of the behind the scenes side of things. So just a bit of backdrop before I start. My role So I'm employed by the Chilterns Conservation Board through a National Lottery Heritage Funded Landscape Partnership Scheme. So we have the luxury, and we'll come back to this a number of times as we go through the presentation, of some quite significant lottery funding to help, not just with the cluster, but with other projects around the Central Chilterns landscape. But most predominantly, we have a sizable resource to support the project that's got us up and running. So my role is working there and working with Ian to set the cluster up and to deliver. I'll probably use the words we and us a lot in this conversation, but I'm kind of at pains to stress I'm not a farmer. This is very much about the farmers in our cluster, in the Central Chilterns cluster, and their work and their response, if you like, to declines in wildlife across the patch, and how fantastic they've galvanised and worked through. So if I use we and us, it's in the context of actually sharing the value of the work in the group. So a bit of background there. So essentially, the map I've put up here, you'll do well to really pick out places. But if you go to, this is our kind of rough cluster area. All the shaded areas are the farms in our cluster, so 18 of them, covering 6,500 hectares in total, plus or minus. And the town you can see at the bottom is High Wycombe, and we essentially kind of emanate northwest and northeast of Wycombe. So coming up to Wendover, along the Chiltern Escarpment, to Chinner, and all places in between, essentially there. So that's our coverage as it stands at the moment. The areas in between the shaded areas, if you can really see the map, are largely greener wooded areas. So from a connectivity perspective, it's been a real, I think, hopefully success so far. I've been able to piece together connected farms, particularly in the two central belts where most of our farms are actually physically neighbours of each other. So it's brilliant for getting that kind of landscape connection together. But that's us, and that's where we are. Geographically. Our overall focus, and we're probably slightly different to those of you that are involved in facilitation funding clusters. We haven't gone down the kind of let's set our objectives and facilitation funding, because we're not facilitation funded, but essentially our three main aims, if you like, or main kind of themes that run behind what we do essentially are, as a group, to really collect evidence about what is happening on our farms. Our farms are farms. What's from a wildlife perspective, they're moving more into things like carbon and soil health, having an evidence base and working together to make good decisions about the future, whether that's about wildlife habitat or increasingly more so things like carbon storage. So that a lot of what we do is geared around trying to get more collaborative work, but all evidence based to support decisions moving forward. And a key part, and we'll come on to this again, actually an underlying mantra, if you like, that actually if we're going to make a difference, we need to really focus on an exciting our farmers, engaging them, taking the time to really engage them and get to know them and the farms, and enthusing them and inspiring them about the wildlife or what's actually on the farms themselves. So a lot of time and effort, hopefully trying to work towards that end. And then I guess where the lottery funding really comes in, and a lot of the feedback, particularly Ian, and you were brilliant in working this through in the lottery phase, is this end-to-end support package. It's great coming together and having a pie or talking about some ideas, but actually if there's not the support resource to either give professional advice or to help with practical delivery of projects, or actually with monitoring, it's quite hard to get those projects off the ground. So we've deliberately steered the lottery funding and the lottery bid based on what the farmers were saying they wanted. And I'll come on to that as we go through the themes of the presentation. So that's a bit of background as to kind of what the context for where we are and how the cluster's kind of set up. So picking up on that, and we've spent a lot of time, and I guess my role really, I don't know how many pairs of walking boots I've got through in the last couple of years since we've been working on this project, is taking time to engage, time on farm, time not behind an email, not necessarily on the phone, even out on farms, getting to know individual farms, getting to know their individual farms themselves, making it fun. Until COVID anyway, we couldn't do it, but a lot of informal meetings in pubs with pies, with pints. We've got a really active WhatsApp group as well. Some may say maybe too active somewhere, but a brilliant way of just sharing ideas or photos and a bit of banter and keeping it quite light, keeping it fun, but also lots of real life work. So picture here of some bird ringing project we'll come on to there. Actual moments that inspire. So whether it's a barn owl in the hand or practical work, putting up a barn owl box, lots of things that help our farmers really engage with, I guess, what we're trying to achieve and to make it real for them on their individual farms. So I guess key part of my role and also Ian's to really get that excitement in place. So we spent a fair bit of time in the first year or so really doing that. And one of the first things I'll share here, one of the first things we actually did to kind of make that real was undertake a LinkedIn with the GWCT Big Farm and Bird Count. teamed up with there are now 12 volunteers working across the 18 farms to help our farmers deliver the Big Farmer Bird Count. So we've just completed our 3rd year. Some of the numbers there we'll come back to in development as we come through, but we're getting close on recording 100 species of birds across the cluster, which is pretty good going, really. But that initial piece of work, having someone out there on farm, looking at the birds, sharing ideas, this is what a linnet looks like, this is what a yellowhammer looks like, has really given us a kind of a foundation to build on, to move forward. And I'll come back to some of those themes as we come through. The stone curlew, by the way, I know you have them still breeding down in your patch. That was a migrant one passing through, but it would be nice one day if we can get them back breeding in the Chilterns. But very jealous of yours. So one of the key stories on this graph here, really just kind of showing from some of the records from this year's count, but just showing farms actually in this kind of constant narrative, I think that's really kind of chipping away, that's been played back to me definitely a number of times. Is that, oh, farmland in the Chilterns, it's dead, there's no wildlife, where's the biodiversity, where are the farming birds? And actually I think the more we look, the more we're finding, more we're actually realizing that actually it's not a desert out there. There still is wild. There's still a lot of love. We've got 14 farms across the cluster, still got healthy populations wintering of yellowhammer. We've got 6 farms still with corn bunting wintering on. There still is a wildlife out there, and trying to, I guess, kind of dispel that myth that it's it's dead and there's nothing around. But also with the health warning that actually we've got a good distribution of birds and a proxy for wildlife across the farms. But actually you could equate it to a little bit like Noah's Ark. So actually we've still got the wildlife out there, but actually it's in a pair here or a pair there, or one pair on one farm or a couple of territories on another. So actually we've still got time to turn that around and to build on what we have, rather than it all being lost. And I think that message really, and the farm surveys have really helped to kind of bring that to life, make it real for our farmers, but also give us a platform to build a lot of the activity that we've been doing over the last couple of years. So key message here, volunteers, absolutely yes, we've tried where we can to engage a lot of volunteers and broker the volunteers on farms, which I think has been well received. But that evidence base, but actually that underlying message is actually there's still lots of great life out there. There's still lots of great populations of birds we didn't know before, but we still need to do more to move it forward to make it a stronger, more resilient population. So what have we been doing then? And this whole point around collaboration, and I'm sure, Ian, you'll talk about this kind of all for one and one for all kind of point through, that actually the strength is really in all 18 of the farmers working together. So 2 years ago, we put forward the idea to farmers saying, actually, well, if we want to help our birds that we've just been surveying and working through, one great way of doing that, a relatively simple, easy, practical way of doing that, is through winter supplementary feeding. So over the last 2 years now, we're just coming to the end of our 2nd year of that project. But all 18 farmers have taken part and have responded brilliantly to the challenge. We had a training session, a briefing session. But then over the 2 years, we've now fed, probably getting on for 23 tons of food to the birds across the Central Chilterns. We've put 50 odd feeders up around the farms now. Again, the lottery has helped pay for that. So again, and I'll come back to this being supported by the lottery funding, but a brilliant way of getting some really meaningful, practical, important wildlife support out there across the piece, and all 18 farms responded to do that. We've had a project with a local owl and raptor group. So we have the Bucks Owl and Raptor group working with us. So we've part funded with lottery and with the Bucks Bird Club. We've still got some more to go because we keep getting hampered by the wet weather and COVID, but hopefully we'll have boxes up across all 18 farms. But last spring, when we could get out, was just a spring again around monitoring those boxes, and actually a barn owl in the hand or a kestrel in the hand makes such a difference in terms of that engagement. So that constant theme of simple, practical, easy things that the farmers can do that make a big difference, but also have a high impact when you can see a box on the tree or you can see a barn owl in the hand, really makes a difference. And there's a lot of success coming through there. So another one of those very simple collaborative projects. We then kind of thought about, well, actually, how can we start to move this slightly away from birds and start to move things on a little bit more? So we set out probably a year ago, I guess, wasn't it, to set the group a 2 kilometre challenge. So we said, basically, if we use our lottery funding to buy seed, would the farmers commit across the cluster? And again, this cluster point is really important, that could we commit to planting 2 kilometres of new pollen nectar margin across the cluster? A collaborative approach. You ended up with either planted or will plant this spring. just over 3 kilometres of new pollen nectar mixed margins for essentially a chalk grassland mixed seeds going in. So again, the group coming together, finding a 200 metres of a field edge to work together, so gradually kind of getting more into practical things, but doing it together. And obviously seeing some of the immediate results. The bottom right picture there was, even despite last spring being so dry, getting some really instant results on the new margins they planted. So gaining momentum, but doing it in a safe and a comfortable way that the farmers in the group are happy to work to. Slight diversion from original point, but last summer I guess you guys have probably shared a similar kind of thing. Lots of reports of increased access for people out across the farm. So we thought, well, is there a way we could use some of the lottery money to do some more informative, welcoming signage across the farms? So we produced 320 copies of 7 different designs. So as you enter a field, if it's got livestock in, we produced a couple of signs with a bit of information about livestock farming or arable farming or some of the habitat features, to try and kind of give the public walking through the farms in the cluster a bit more information and a welcoming, but equally reinforcing some of the messages around the countryside code and respecting footpaths, those kind of things. Again, at the response to a request coming back up from the farms in the group. So lots of collaborative projects, lots of projects where we can do some real meaningful good and get people engaged and excited, but also part of the offer is actually advice, getting professional advice. And that's part of mine and my colleague Harriet Bennett, who's not here today's role. And we have the budget to do all these kind of commission advice. So we've had workshops on hedgerow management. We've got people in to help farmers with their grassland management, with pond management. We've been able to commission management plans on a couple of triple SIs. We've done some botanical surveys, and we want to do more of that. The key thing here, I guess, is the right advice delivered at the right time by the right people when farmers want it. And again, that's again part of mine and Harriet's role in using the lottery budget to provide that as and when it's needed, when farmers are ready on an individual level to build that through. So we have an advisory package. And a key part of Harriet's role, and this was a real key part of the feedback in the development of the lottery bid, that farmers were saying, well, actually, it's great getting advice, but actually what I need is practical help to go off and do stuff. Where do I go and get my supplies from? So we're able now, and over the last year or so, we've let a number of capital works contracts. We've sourced hedgerow whips, hedgerow planting projects. Again, part of Harriet's role is to oversee and work with contractors. So the picture you can see at the top there was part of an 8-week scrub clearance management on one of our chalk grassland triple SIs that on behalf of the farmer, Harriet oversaw and managed the contractors on site and got that project through to start to finish. So we can offer that really practical on the ground support to make that world a lot easier, a lot simpler, a lot more straightforward for the farmers in the group. So working with them and to their wishes, but make that easier and use some of the lottery money to provide some economies of scale to make that happen. And we're just starting now to get to the other end of doing some quite large scale, and that's ultimately the gist where we're trying to get large scale habitat creation or restoration projects. So 3 examples here where we've been planting and putting in some stock fencing around just shy of 2 kilometres worth of new hedges on one farm. Literally started yesterday. And this is on the back of some hedgerow surveys that we commissioned, an extensive programme of hedgerow coppicing and planting and realigning stock fencing to allow the hedgerows to be managed better on some farms. And on one farm, a brand new high-tier countryside stewardship agreement with help support from start to finish, and then go on and deliver that includes the scrub clearance that we just shared, but also some hedge laying, some hedgerow planting, and a new meadow kind of arable reversion field as well. So starting now over the couple of years to begin to get through that process where farmers are saying, actually, I want to go further with this now, please. Can you help me with some scalable practical projects? Key part of what we're doing also as well, that the farmers really said from the outset, it's great doing all this, but I want to know if it's making a difference. Is all my work on my stewardship, whatever it is, am I getting more wildlife or am I making a difference on the ground? So we have a number of things that we're helping at the moment putting in place. So we have a bird ringing project, a local ringing group working on 5 farms at the moment. Again, hampered by COVID, but we kind of can't do much about that. But really helping to start to tell the story, I guess, and find out, and again, enthuse, excite, but also it's a really important monitoring details. And little gems come out of those kind of things that really help. So I'll introduce you to corn bunting here, first ringed November 2019, and then rung again about, I think, 6 weeks later on the same site, was 6 grams heavier. So the power of that story, and that coincided with the first year of the supplementary feeding project. So a really powerful story. Not only do we know what the birds are living there, but actually in that 6 weeks or so, farmer could see straight away his efforts putting the supplementary food out had meant that bird now had come back and was in a healthier condition when they first started. So little nuggets that just really help, as well as obviously the value of the science and the data that the ring brings. And a similar story with this yellowhammer here. It was ringed 2 weeks ago on one farm. And it was also, but it was a retrap. So retrap ring this time, but it was rung 1st of November last year on a farm in the cluster, 8 miles away. So again, those local stories about saying actually on a scale, on a landscape scale, these 23 kind of feeding stations around the 18 farms, birds will pick and choose. They have numbers of places to go. Birds work on a landscape scale, and that 8-mile difference between farm A and farm B really kind of helps tell that story. So lots about monitoring, yes, about trends, but also those little nuggets that really help to kind of gel and give the farms that instant inspiration and feedback that things are really making a difference. Moving away a little bit from birds, I would say as a birder into bird food, but that's probably a bit harsh. But we're just working with the Bucks Mammal Group to get another volunteer-led project to set up some small mammal trapping surveys. We can only manage 3 farms in the first year, but hope it will grow. So we've been able to help the group set up with some Longworth traps, and they're going to be this spring and through to the winter, setting out and doing some regular structured small mammal surveys to understand what the value of the hedgerows and the margins are for small mammals. And similarly as well, we've donated 300 or so refugia from Atkins Global on the back of their East-West Rail project. And we're going to kind of recycle those essentially into refugia as part of a amphibian and reptile project across the 18 farms. So again, just breaking out, getting some important records, yes, about the wildlife on the farms, but giving farmers lots of points to understand what's living on the farm, what's living there, and get that moment of inspiration as we come through. So monitoring a key part of the offer of what we've been able to do. So next steps. And this is kind of I'll leave you with this slide here before we open to questions, that we've been able to build through that process of, I suppose, a lot of momentum, a lot of engagement, but trust and a lot of excitement in what we can do, and made some small scale or getting bigger scale now differences on the ground. But it's about 6 months ago, we said to the group, actually, well, everything that's happening now with ELM coming in and all the changes to stewardship and BPS, what about if we use the lottery money to engage a team of consultants to help you with writing a whole farm plan? Essentially going out and look at all the habitat options across your farms, then give you the foundation stone. So this is that kind of evidence piece, coming back to the evidence piece, gives the foundation stone for you to then build either a stewardship application or a biodiversity net gain application, or to help inform some of your management. So, and fantastic response to that. All 18 have said yes. So we have consultants out there at the moment doing the field work and writing up their reports that we'll start to share in the spring, and then build hopefully a number of practical projects and give everybody the basis to make sense of the ELM in the coming years, having that evidence base and those maps and those ideas and those recommendations in place. So we're starting to build from small beginnings to hopefully some really impactful differences that will give the farms in the group that real stepping stone to some really exciting things in the future. So that's a real whistle-stop tour, I guess, of the kind of things we've been doing. Happy to share more details on the Q&A session as we go through, but probably enough for me. You probably want to hear more from Ian and from the reality of what it's been like as Ian's role as chair and also as a farmer in the group. A bit of background and context, the kind of things we'll be doing in the first couple of years.
Thank you very much, Nick. You may be jealous of our stone curlews, but we're very jealous of your farmer cluster. Can I ask Ian now to switch himself on? Ian, I think you're going to follow up with some words yourself following Nick's presentation, and then we'll be moving on and bringing in Richard Edwards at that stage. Ian, are you there?
I am, but Anna hasn't switched my video on.
Aha.
So never mind, I will make a start.
It's coming any second, I hope. No, you should be fine. Okay, keep talking and I'll try and fix it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so thank you very much for inviting me and Nick. Yeah, good opportunity to talk to other like-minded people. Yeah, it's been an interesting journey because I was quite involved with the Heritage Lottery Bid at the beginning of this process. probably even before Nick came on board, completely sort of in the really early ideas of how we were going to do things. But we weren't really in those days talking about cluster farms. It was, my idea was, yes, I'd help the Conservation Board win the Hedgerow Lottery Fund bid, but I wanted some money ring fence for agriculture, and that's how it all really started. And how it evolved was we ended up with a cluster and using that money in the cluster. So it's been an interesting journey. I will say, without the likes of Nick and Harriet, it might have not happened, but as ever, you know, history takes its course. So for me, I am reasonably engaged. Just a bit of background, I'm first generation farmer on a tenanted farm, all FBT. So quite a big challenge. There's a commercial shoot on the estate that I'm based on, so there's quite a lot of pressure from pheasants. So I really am up against it, but I've always engaged with the environment in some shape or form, and hence my interest in this project, really. I'm, yeah, as we said, I'm a leaf demo farmer involved with the NFU. I've got quite a lot of hats I wear, but I'm a firm believer that if you want to shape things and be involved, you need to be involved to, you know, get things to happen in the right way for agriculture, really. So the start of the cluster was, you know, very slow, and as ever, to get engagement and trust is quite difficult. So it involves a lot of personal phone calls from me to get people just along for that first meeting, which probably took something in the region of a year to get that off the ground. But once we started to meet, that was, you know, progress started to be made. So my sort of key point I really want to hit home, and I did say to Henry I'd be quite controversial on this, so whether you like this or not, this is how I operate. This cluster, my cluster, is about, you know, if you're in it at the beginning, okay, but if you're not, don't think you can turn up later to the party. It's very much, you know, your invitation was there, seize the opportunity. If you turn it down, you're not going to get asked again. And that's quite hard on people, but I was a firm believer that to build trust and a relationship within a diverse group mix of farmers, although most of us knew one another, to do some of these projects as we are doing on a landscape scale took a bit more than just, oh, I know them. It's about building trust, relationship and cooperation amongst a group. And I've been quite frustrated at times because it doesn't happen as quick as I'd like. But it's starting to really evolve now. And the rest of the cluster sort of get it, I think, is a simple way of putting it, because it's not easy to keep a bunch together and focused and trusting amongst themselves if you keep people coming in or people leaving. And then you get the arguments of, well, they've had that, why can't I have that? Well, you've only been here 5 minutes. Are you going to be here for the long game, or are you here just to grab some money and go? So that's the reason I'm quite strict on how I control the cluster in a way. It's no two ways about it. It's control. And I apologize for that if you don't like it, but that's the way I think we make it work, by maintaining that trust amongst the group. And it's not easy to do, but I think the benefits as a result of that are really starting to happen now. So just only a week ago, we've won another bid for some more money from outside the lottery, from another stream, which I've been passionate in forcing Nick to go and look for new money, because it's all very well sitting on the money we've got, but it won't be there forever. So we need to branch out and find other income streams. We found another income stream, and we're utilising that money to do a carbon audit. And Nick said, well, we'd be lucky if we get 60 or 70% of them engaged. Well, I'm only 2 phone calls away from having 100%. One of them might be a bit tricky, but the other one I'm pretty confident I'll get. Most of the people were on a Zoom meeting. Some people couldn't make it, so hence the phone calls. But, you know, to get that commitment to do a carbon audit over the whole acreage is quite something. And it's not for everybody. I do understand that. I've done it. I get it. I understand how it's going to help me farm in the future. But they've trusted me, and they wouldn't have trusted me if we were a fragmented group going in all different directions and coming and going. So that's the reason I keep banging on about that. But that trust doesn't happen easily. And for any of you who are interested in doing something like this, I think you need to commit to it. You do need a strong leader with vision to guide and cajole someone like Nick to, and you're not going to find another Nick, I'll tell you that now, because he's too good at what he's doing. Thank you, Nick, again, for what you do. But you need strong leadership, and you need someone who's prepared to go that extra mile in coordinating it all and joining up all the dots, doing all the boring work, which I can't do. I'm a busy farmer with lots of other hats on and trying to run the work, my farm as well, with just one man, I will add. So please ask some questions. We're here to help you. And I look forward to seeing what you think.
Great, thank you very much, Ian. That's brilliant. I'm now going to ask Richard Edwards to switch his camera and microphone on, just to quickly explain. Rich is the forestry manager for the Englefield estate in the North West Extend, and has been talking to a group of neighbouring estates and farms over the last couple of years about the possibility of putting together a cluster. And with some support from DEFRA, we are currently, well, we're about to kick off, aren't we, Richard? Some support to help convene that group. And I know, so I thought, as somebody at the embryonic stage, it would be good to have your thoughts. So Richard, if you want to ask a question to kick us off, and then I understand you've kindly agreed to stay on the panel in case anyone wants to direct a question specifically to you. And then we'll come to questions from the audience at that stage. Over to you, Richard.
Thanks. Firstly, just want to say thanks a lot to Nick and Ian. It's very sort of inspiring for someone at the start of this journey to hear those words. That's great. And also for Ian saying how long it took for the initial sort of startup. We've been beating ourselves up a little bit here, thinking that we've taken a long time to get it moving. And actually, it's good to hear that we're not the only ones. And dealing with a pandemic in the meantime probably hasn't helped either. But I suppose my first question really is in terms of the importance of the farmers working together and what can be achieved through collaboration rather than farmers going alone, and what your experience has been in terms of being able to upscale some of the sort of aspirations of the farmers within the cluster.
You aiming that at me? Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I think there's more to come, obviously, with ELM, but we don't really know what's in there. We've got great aspirations for what we'd like to see in there, but we certainly in Sustainable Farming Initiative, there might not be much in there for collaborative working, but certainly in the landscape scale bit, which I will call tier 2. It's not allowed to be called that, but I can't remember its full title. But collaborative working will be there, and I think we're going to be in a really good position. Especially when what we've just done with the carbon, what we've just done with the whole farm surveying, and that's really we're going to be in a really good place, and I'm looking forward to it really starting to happen and delivering even more than we are already. And we're only really just the tip of the iceberg, as it were. There's a lot more underneath, but all those farmers, I suppose, to give you an indication, there was probably 5 or 6 of them involved in stewardship in the past in some shape or form. Some of them not probably fully engaged in it, were just doing it because for the money, let's put it blunt. Whereas I tended to do it because of the wider environment and the bigger impact I can make. But you roll that out across all 18 farms and we can have a massive impact, and years ago, people have always said, oh, you haven't got this in the Chilterns, you haven't got that. We were always told we hadn't got corn buntings. Well, I thought we had. The surveyors and the trust built there showed that. And going forward, perhaps we can have a corn bunting project that we wouldn't have been allowed to have as individuals, or as, to work collaboratively and improve that habitat for corn buntings as just one species. And as you well know, you never, as far as you try and improve things, you actually draw in other things and you improve other aspects of the environment. So I'm really excited about going forward and having that bigger full engagement and very much joined up, and everybody going with the flow, because that trust has been built in the early days when it was hard work.
Can I add a couple of points, Richard, if that's okay to that? I think from a slightly different perspective, but the corn bunting and the yellowhammer example I used in the presentation as well, from an ecological perspective, collaboration on that scale makes a difference as well. A massive difference. So the yellowhammer from farm A to farm B, I'm not saying it's solely because of what we're doing, but actually farmers working together, we can start to track that kind of stuff and see results on that kind of scale. And equally, I guess the 18 farmers working together, there's a lot. I mean, if you can see some of the conversations on the WhatsApp group, little things like giving out prizes for bird survey, that kind of banter and that kind of humour as well, that goes a long way to kind of keeping that group dynamics going. So yes, the collaborative projects and the end game, but actually the dynamics and that kind of trust and fun, I guess, as well, that it builds, makes such a difference when you build those kind of small little touches in as well. So lots of benefits to working on that front.
Yeah, on the bird side, it's quite interesting because I don't know all of it, but I know quite a few, and I deliberately put pictures up occasionally to provoke, to see if anybody does know, and give them a hand clap if they do know. But I put the picture of a back of a sparrowhawk up the other day because it was facing the other way. Nobody dare say what they thought it was. So straight away, you sort of, they know there's a bit of banter there, but nobody dare put their head above the parapet. Other things, there's a list of people. And sometimes you think, well, blinking heck, someone must have looked up in a book to know, how did they know exactly what that was? Certainly with some of the wildflowers we found. So the WhatsApp group was one of my ideas, and it does work. That inter-farm competition works. The banter works. And you saw a picture of on Nick's slide. We've generally met in a pub. And the first thing you need to do to get a farmer in a pub is offer him a pint or a pie. And that's, we're spending heritage lottery money on pint and a pie, but that was about engagement with those species of farmers that otherwise wouldn't have turned up unless there was something, a reward there, as it were, like a feeding station for a bird.
Thank you very much. Richard, we've got questions coming in now on the Q&A. So I think we're going to go over to answer one or two of those, and then we'll come back to you again, if that's all right, in a moment. Corinna, as I say, is going to alternate with me on the Q&A. So over to you.
Right. Okay. So we've got a few questions in the Q&A, and you just mentioned pie and pints being funded by the lottery. There's a question from Jonathan Capes, who's asked, how did you access the lottery funds, and was it a lump sum, an annual payment, or do individual projects have to be proposed for funding? And the second part to that question, why that route rather than facilitation fund?
I'll start with the last bit. The facilitation fund, sorry if anybody's listening who's from DEFRA or Natural England, it's not fit for purpose, in my opinion. I've had so many people involved in other groups that it doesn't quite meet the spec what we want to do, and it's an endless stream of paperwork. So for us, we're in I'm fully aware we're in an extremely privileged position, and not everybody's going to be in that position, but you need money to make this work, and we're looking at other funding streams, as I've said. But Nick, would you like to elaborate a bit on the journey through the Hedgerow Lottery Bid, because you were there at the very beginning, near the beginning with that? Yeah,
absolutely. Two bits. If I pick up the facilitation fund to start with, we could have, and we did consider going, in addition to lottery, going down the facilitation fund route. But I think the key thing in all of the development phase, and this is a lot of conversations and cups of tea in your kitchen, Ian, and with others, that this end-to-end package came up time and time again. So why are we not doing things? Why are we not doing? Why has it not worked in the past? What can we do better? And this whole continuous, if I'm excited and I can get advice and I can get a route to get some practical support and I can get a little bit of funding and you can help me monitor what I'm doing, I'm in. and facilitation fund takes you partway down that road and then stops. So from a training perspective, it's brilliant at bringing people in together and offering training workshops. And we've kind of found that, I'm paraphrasing horribly now, but it's to get people excited and informed, but then not having the doing money to put that on the ground and actually practice and deliver that. So that's part of the reason from a facilitation fund perspective, we chose not to go on that route. Not that it's not a great tool to get things up and running and get stuff started, but we wanted to add that doing money element to it. The wider picture from a lottery perspective, we're part of a broader landscape partnership scheme. So we're funded essentially to look at wildlife projects on one hand, but also a lot of heritage projects and community projects as well. So you wrap it all up, there's a lot of different things, and wildlife is one part of that. It probably took, and this is way before my time on the board now, it probably took best part of 2 years to get that through the development phase, and then to get the money in, and then we've got 5 years of funding now. So it's not an easy route at all. It's not a quickly write an application and send it in and you get it through, but actually the returns are really powerful at the other end. And there are lots of other different ways of bringing it in. So I guess in a way the cluster itself didn't apply for lottery funding, it was the Conservation Board that applied. And then we chose to then use that resource in the way that we've decided here, if that answers your question. Shout if it doesn't.
Thank you very much. We've got another question now, which is perhaps comes back to something Ian said earlier, which is, have you had anyone refuse to join the cluster? And why were people backward in coming forward?
Right, so at the first meeting, they were all people I'd invited, and one of them is mainly a general agricultural contractor, has some of his own rented land, has some share farm land and various contract arrangements. And he's not particularly he's not environmentally aware at all, let's be blunt about it. So he's not environmentally aware. He's probably feels slightly transient in the way he manages his business. So, you know, he might be not farming that piece of land tomorrow. And when he came to the first meeting, made some noises. He has got a strange demeanor. He's a bit grumpy. So, and then when he said, well, it's not really for me, my landowners wouldn't like it. I said, right, that's fine, that's good. And we didn't invite him again. Whether he looks in from the outside now and thinks, bugger, I've missed an opportunity there or not, I don't know. But for my rules and my dictatorship, if you like, well, it's sort of tough. You weren't there, you were there at the beginning, but you walked away. Well, that's, you know, that's where you are, you're away. So I'm quite rigid in those. We've, just to sort of add to that, we've had quite a few people say, oh yeah, we'll come and join you, but sorry, we're a closed shop. and I'm, yeah, you can tell I'm, you know, that's how it is. And I think that's yes, it'd be nice to have a few more acres, but those acres that you gain, you could lose somewhere else. So yeah, that's the story behind that, really.
No, that as well, particularly from my perspective, being actually, so we could invite more and more to, as Ian says, but actually doing a quality job with the farmers we've got is really key. So if you're prepared to come with us on the journey, as Ian says, I personally will make sure I can do everything I can to make sure you get absolutely the support you need to do a really good job, as opposed to lots of superficial bits across, and not spread the resource so thin. So there's the flip side of the same coin, isn't it? You know, we want to make sure that the resource we have, we do as good a job as we put, make as big an impact, rather than spreading it so thin that actually it doesn't really do the job we need it to do. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
We've got a couple more questions around the funding side of things. So we've got a question from Ted Hiscox, who asks about the income stream that Ian mentioned. Can you tell us what type of source this is? Is it an individual, charity, commercial concern, public body? And possibly tied in with that, there's a second question from Peter Lemon, because I believe that was for carbon survey. So how did you go about getting the carbon survey across the entire cluster? So, right,
well, I'll start with, so because I'm the one who sort of drives it, I suppose, I'd done a carbon cutting toolkit audit just over a year ago. I engaged with them because I was in the Soil Farm of the Year competition last year, and I just found, I hate audits. I'm a member of Leaf, which I don't do the Leaf audit. I'm not a Leaf Mark member. I hate my red tractor audit, but I know why it's necessary. I hate paperwork, full stop, really. So it's quite easy. But the carbon cutting sort of audit really sort of opened my eyes into how I farm. I'm a regenerative farmer, if you like. I've been direct drilling for 6 years over the whole acreage of my holding. I grow cover crops wall to wall. It's a cover crop in the background behind me. So I've got that mindset, and I just thought I'd really like to know where I stand carbon wise. I'm an NFU man. I've challenged my net over net zero by 2040. I think it's too far away. I think we should be aiming our sights a lot higher as the NFU, but not everybody can do it. So the idea behind the cluster doing the carbon audit was really that we know some of the dairy guys are really going to struggle with it, but as a group, I think we could become carbon negative, and it'd be nice to be the first group as a whole that are carbon negative by sharing. My mantra is all for one for all. And that means we protect the little guys, or the guys that have got a bigger carbon footprint than others, and we all do it for the common good. So the funding for that was part of my vision that we should look for outside money. And, Nick and I bumped into somebody and a meeting on tried and tested, and it really sprung from there. And I'll let Nick tell you the process he went through to secure that funding.
Yeah, so you still, if I'm breaking in and out, then shout, but I think I'm back with you now. I lost you a little bit there.
Good.
Yeah, so we're literally, I think we can, it's all confirmed now, so we can announce it. So we've been working with the Rothschild Foundation for the last 6 months or so, probably a bit longer than that. And it's born out of a partnership with, so the Farm Carbon Toolkit that Ian's been talking about there, and the Rothschilds, who are very keen to position themselves at the centre of kind of resilient farming, regenerative farming. So it's a kind of a partnership approach that we've taken with them, and I think it's a phase one of an approach. We'll do the audits and we'll understand where we're at. Hopefully we can then turn that into a phase two and a phase three, where we can do some practical work on the back of those audits. So that's the background to it. We start delivery in a kind of months or so's time. Hopefully phase one will be complete by the back end of the summer, and then we can take it forward from there.
Excellent. Thank you both very much. We've got a practical question here aimed at Ian, asking whether it's possible to give details about the structure of the cluster. For example, do you have a steering group? Who holds the finances? How are they dealt with? And are you a community interest company, or do you have any sort of formal structure?
Right. Yeah, good question. It's a dictatorship. I've already described that. It's all down to me. My vision about what I would like, where I think they should be heading. Not very often anybody challenges me on it. A few of my friends might, about why have you done it like this? Well, this is the way I see it as a farmer. If we would I'll turn it round slightly. If you, Henry, for instance, came up with the idea that you wanted a landscape to look in a certain way, probably wouldn't go down that well with some of your farmers. But for me as a farmer, saying this is where we need to be, or this is where we need to be seen to be doing, or this, we need to be doing these surveys for birds or whatever, they take it 100 times better, because because they know that I'm doing it for the right reasons. They might not totally agree with it, but they're coming along for the ride. And I say the sort of journey and the dictatorship bit of it's not quite as onerous as it sounds, but if I don't do it, it won't happen. I think if we had a committee to decide it, we'd end up spending most of our time talking round it rather than actually getting on with it. It does put a lot of pressure on me, but I'm happy with that, to steer and guide it until someone else wants to take on that mantra. But it's not an easy task. There's no two ways about it. It's hard work taking everybody with you, and it needs a bit of cajoling sometimes, but I think we manage it. So I think I'd make it work that way, and I haven't had too many complaints.
Just and from a practical perspective, which I guess there's an element of the questions coming in from all the financial side of things, because essentially the Chilterns Conservation Board is anchoring it. We take on all of that financial responsibility. So we hold the money. Between Harriet and I, we procure things. We worry about all the procurement or the invoicing. So we keep that away from yourselves and a grouping, which I guess takes a lot of. And so there's a practical bit to that, but there's also, by not going too formal, it keeps the group informal. It's not like a committee and doesn't generate into kind of committee run. It's an informal group that hopefully farmers want to come to, and they look forward to coming to the meetings, rather than being too overly structured. But I say we've got the luxury of the Conservation Board, a silent partner, if you like, behind the scenes, doing a lot of that financial accountability stuff that maybe other clusters haven't got. So we're probably set up slightly differently to others, but hopefully that answers how we get around that.
Great, thank you, Nick. And another practical question from Jan Ledoux. Is it any more difficult to encourage tenants rather than owner-occupiers to participate?
Right, we've got a good mixture of all, actually. Yeah, it's 50-50, I'd have said, across the board. Pretty much, yeah. We've got an organic farmer. We've got a very commercial dairy farmer whose cows are doing best part of 13,000 litres average across 500 cows. So you can tell he's quite intensive. And, you know, me, an FBT farmer. And it's a good mix. We've got, yeah, farmer owners, but everybody's very engaged in doing, you know, the right thing on the land. I think that's a key thing. There's just trying to think if there's a farm. Yeah, we've got a couple of farm managers. So they've obviously had to take their owners with them. Won't say I'll get involved in that side of it, but they're there, and one of them is, you know, it's got a very much a free hand, and the owner of that estate is, you know, realizes the true benefit of what we're achieving. He is environmentally aware, and yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. I suppose you need that diversity. Farmers are diverse from their, you know, even the landscape is similar, but it's not the same, and everybody has different pressures. I expect the worst scenarios, and I see this as a first generation farmer, is sometimes there's pressure from the father or mother who still holds the purse strings within a farm business. But generally those haven't proven a problem in this instance. But we're never, at the moment, we haven't pushed any radical changes as far as farming practices. That might happen in the future with environmental land management coming along, but my vision is to have them all prepared for whatever might come built into these new schemes. You know, that's my whole goal of this, is to prepare them for whatever the future holds, good, bad, or indifferent, to take their businesses and their farms and their environment into this new world that potentially we will be in within the next 5 to 7 years.
That sounds perfect, and it certainly seems to be a motivating factor among land managers in the North Wessex Downs that they want to be prepared, if you like, and ahead of the game. We've got time, I think, just about for one more question, which I'm going to go to Richard, come back to Richard and ask you, Richard, if there's anything you'd like to ask as the final word before we close.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I suppose the one question which I think is seems to be quite important. Obviously, the farmers within the cluster are very important to making the cluster happen. But who would you sort of identify as the people sort of outside of the cluster, sort of the other stakeholders or the other people that are able to input into sort of the delivery of your objectives? Who do you think they are, sort of government agencies and beyond? And also of the ones that you've tried to engage with, have there been any ones that are more of a challenge than others?
Right, so I suppose the key thing is building trust, but then it's building trust with people that farmers wouldn't normally have on their farms, because farmers might be frightened of what they might find, and they'd shut down their farming operation and they'd have to look after whatever they found, you know, the rare flower, the archaeology, whatever. But reality isn't really like that, but farmers have that fear of that. So building that trust to allow those people, all those volunteers that are unsung, if you like, that are really key to making this work. Because Nick, much as he likes bird watching, hasn't got the time, or is not allowed to spend all his time out bird watching. And that's his specialist field. We need people to look at mammals. We need people to look at reptiles. We need people to look at archaeology. We need people to look at did I say wildflowers, and that sort of side of it. So, and once you get people volunteers onto farm and talking to farmers, you break down those historic barriers, and those people aren't costing us very much, but the impact they're having is massive. And as you saw some of those pictures, all my farmers are really pleased if they've got a barn owl in their hand, and they're really proud of that. Whereas 3 years ago, they might have not even known they've got a barn owl on their farm, probably, and some of them wouldn't even know what a barn owl really looked like, I hate to say, but it's a part of that journey. I can't quite remember the last part of the question, sorry. Put you on the spot.
So the last question was just who have any of the organisations that you may have wanted to engage with, have any of them not being easy to engage with or sort of reluctant?
Well, at the moment we're all right, but then we've done a lot of stuff in-house, as it were, through our own network of people who have been working with the Conservation Board over the years, people Nick knows from his bird sort of world, and getting those onto farm. So there's a definite hunger for people to be out there. My bird surveyor, who's a friend of Nick's, is just so passionate about what he's doing, and so feels so privileged. I've allowed him onto my farm. That's and he's always asking me permission. Can I do this or can I do that? And so that is so important. And I don't think we've had any problems yet with other outside organisations, but I suppose we're quite careful how we select people. And one thing that sort of worries me, I suppose, is when we employ a subcontractor to deliver something, they're really only there to do the work, get the money and go. And that's not necessarily about a relationship with that farmer or with that holding. And I'm quite conscious that I'd like another 2 members of staff, for instance, doing some of our own in-house survey work. But, that's not physically possible. The surveyors from the 5 organisations we have involved to do the farm surveys all feel extremely privileged to be part of quite a dynamic farming group. So, I think everything's been really positive at the moment, and our engagement with Natural England has been going in the right direction because we've had quite a bit to say to them. So really, it's all very, very positive at the moment.
I think just a quick addition to Anna, Henry, to wrap up there, but just I think from my side, I see that's probably where Harriet and I step in, that we can filter that. So we can either be a filter or a broker, depending on what's needed. So we totted it up the other day. We're working with about 50 partners who have supported the cluster in some way, shape or form, whether that's the Bucks Mammal Group or some consultants or a group of volunteers or a whole array. But a lot of that's come out of what the group wants. And then it's Harriet and my job to go and find the right people to bring back in. And Ian's point around consultants and making sure when a consultant is let loose, they're briefed properly. We're controlling the brief, if you like, and we know that things aren't going quite so well. So that filtering role that I hope we kind of do, we'll probably do it better, I guess, but is key in that, and make sure you get the right organisation at the right time when farmers want it, as opposed to this kind of everybody arriving at the farm gate and piling in.
Yeah, and that's common wisdom circulating the conservation world, although sometimes you might not notice it. Thank you. We're out of time, I'm afraid. I want to thank you, Nick, you, Ian, and Richard, all very much indeed for your time and for giving us your wisdom and your responses and your questions. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And I particularly want to thank also Corinna and our colleague Anne Shepley and Anna Trant for putting together the talk and running the event. The next webinar in this series is going to be on the 11th of March. You should see on your screen a list of the whole of the rest of the programme. The links to those should be appearing in the chat if you want to click on any of those, but you will also get them in an email with a recording of this event after we've finished. I think that's about it. So I just want to say thank you to everyone again. Hope to see you again at another of our talks, and goodbye.